Hi everyone, welcome back to another Graflex lightsaber video. This is the Dagobah stunt hilt, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about what this prop actually is, what became of it, and obviously the build itself. So I'll take you through all of that. This is a little bit of an obscure hilt, not very well known. So I have recently completed the conversion with the help of a good friend of mine called Martin. Thanks very much, Martin. So without further ado, we'll start off with the origin. So it started off as this. This is the stunt hilt in the Hoth scenes. In particular, it can be seen in the Wampa cave scene. You see it like that. It's submerged in the snow, and Luke calls it to him with the Force, and uses it to cut off the arm of the Wampa and escape. And we know it's different to the kind of classic ESB belt hanger because it has the beer tab and the early Fulmer style button with a thin knurling. That's how you sort of tell it apart from the usual ESB hilts. So this is the Wampa, and it had a short blade for those kind of action scenes like Luke against the Wampa and Han with the Tauntaun probably. But it wasn't a dueling hilt yet. So later on it was modified to accept a longer, kind of more sturdy dueling rod. This was probably necessary for the cave scene in Dagobah when Luke has a vision where he's fighting with Darth Vader, and also I believe some cut scenes where Luke is actually training with Yoda with the lightsaber. So this is that hilt. So it's literally this hilt that's been kind of modified into this to accept a dueling rod. So you can see most of the features are exactly the same. It's got the older style thin knurled Fulmer button on the top, and a regular standard button with the full knurling on the other socket. You can see the Otis style circuit card, the chrome tape covering the Graflex clamp, etc., the cobalt clip, and the D-ring. So most of it is the same. What has been modified are the following things. First of all, we start with the bunny ears. You can see here the band has been removed. I'm not sure if the rivet was removed as well. I can't tell from the reference pictures, but it looks like it has been removed. So there's a tang here with a rod, and obviously the blade kind of goes on top of that. I don't know why this was necessary, but I'm sure it was, just to kind of widen this a bit so it kind of accepts. I'm really not sure, but this is how it looks in the reference pictures, and there aren't many good ones of those. I mean, I found a few reference pictures on that RPF thread, but not many. But there's this kind of disc here, and so only 2 pins, or maybe even just one. But you know, compared to the how it looked in the Wampa, there's obviously a pair of pins on either side, just like you see with every unconverted Graflex flash gun. And you know, the bunny ears are preserved. So that's the first kind of modification up top here. The second one, which is the most obvious feature, is all these bolts. So there's 9 in total. There's 2 smaller ones here on either side of the red button, and there's 7 larger ones, which are, these are sort of M6 size hex screws, and those probably M5s. And these bolts would have been drilled and secured in to just to hold the internal assembly, the core that houses the blade, basically. because this one, when it was on Hoth, it just had a short blade. It wasn't a dueling blade. I don't think it was necessary for them. All they did was, I've seen a picture where it was kind of closed like that, and something was kind of stuck in here with like a short rod, and that's what was used to create that scene against the Wampa. But when it became an actual dueling hilt, it was necessary to kind of modify the whole internal structure. So it looked really, really different from the top. The clamp section is exactly the same. No changes there as far as I can tell. Interestingly, the lower section was modified. I really don't know why, but they switched the classic 6 long grips with the notches and the screws and the kind of straight ends, and they switched them to 7 angled grips like A New Hope. Sort of do the angled and kind of more rounded at the edges there. I'm really not sure why. I don't have a full understanding of why that happened. It might have been a different lower altogether. Not sure. We don't really see the bottom of it, but I made it so it looks exactly the same as the previous one. So again, cobalt, D-ring, pair of large rivets. That's it. We do see it hung on Luke's belt on Dagobah. So it acted as a belt hanger, at least partially, but mostly as a dueling stunt. There is another belt hanger on Dagobah that doesn't look like this. It's, you know, it's clean. It's not got bolts or anything drilled into it, and it's missing the top red button. But this might have been like a secondary one. So what became of this later was it was modified further for the dual on Bespin. It looked exactly the same from up here. The clamp section was wrapped in gaffer tape. Presumably something broke. Not really sure why. These grips were removed again, and foam grips were attached instead, which were quite flat and low profile. So presumably that happened for added comfort for Mark Hamill for the last duel, because that duel is quite long. And then after that, after Empire Strikes Back, it was modified yet again to become Darth Vader's Return of the Jedi stunt hilt, the DV6. You can see that this was clearly a Graflex to begin with. All they did was they removed the bunny ears altogether. The clamp was removed, and again we have kind of 7 New Hope style grips, a cobalt and a D-ring, and then some new kind of greeblies and parts were added, like this shroud greebly there with the D-ring, this weird shroud piece there to make it look, I guess, like an MPP, and this control box with this band there. But you can clearly see, I mean, the giveaway is obviously the bolts. They're exactly the same, the exact same location. So it's strongly believed that these 3 are one and the same hilt in kind of various stages of its life. Here it is as the Wampa. There it's the Dagobah, and there it's the DV6. And in between here somewhere, for Bespin, it'll be exactly like this, with gaffer tape on the clamp and foam grips. And that's basically it. So that's a history of the prop. Now I'm just going to talk a little bit about the build itself. This is a vintage Graflex. It's a vintage Fulmer non-patent Graflex. Both buttons are vintage. That one is an ink. That one is obviously an early Fulmer with the thin knurling. So all I did for the modification is obviously removed the rivet that holds the bunny ears down, and then removed that band. It is a little loose in there, but these 2 tabs kind of hold it down fairly well. It doesn't just fall off. So it's not too bad. I'm not sure if the rivet's there or not. I can't tell. For the top part here, for this disc here and the rod, I used Wonawanga's DV6 conversion kit, just like here. So there's a core inside, the white core, and then half of the original bulb assembly there with the 2 pins, and then this bit here, the disc and that rod are from Wonawanga as well. Beer tab is preserved, just like the Wampa. The 7 larger M6 bolts are vintage, just like on the DV6. These 2 smaller ones that you don't see here because they're covered with this shroud bit like that. So these are not vintage, they're just something from eBay. But they're the right sort of shape and size. I mean, they're meant to be black and sit flush like that, and they are sort of hex screws. Okay, moving down to the clamp area. Again, of course, it's part of the vintage flash, so it's a vintage Graflex clamp. You can see it's an early Fulmer, small rivet. The chrome tape is from Sky Wampa. The clamp card is a vintage Otis board, just like the Wampa. It's not 100% accurate because technically, if it's the same hilt, it should look exactly the same and have this single fat trace of solder on the end. I'm just going to zoom into that a bit. You can see right on the end, so all the solder lines are thin, except the one right at the end is thicker. And that is clearly seen on the Wampa one. So it should have been the same, but those are incredibly hard to find, and if you do find them, they're extremely expensive. So a regular vintage Otis card is absolutely fine. The grips on the lower section are from Wonawanga. You know, the usual A New Hope style ones, cut down, angled, rounded, did a little bit of light weathering to them, just some scratches and nicks. And then finally, the cobalt section. I lined up the cobalt exactly like the Wampa. So it says ER New York on the side there. This is a vintage cobalt clip, and it is the chrome variant, which is exactly the same one as both of those, the Wampa and the DV6. Since it's the same hilt, it's the same lower section presumably, I wanted to use the exact same type of cobalt clip. So this is a vintage chrome cobalt, and I did the damage marks on the sides so that they match with all 3. And a pair of large vintage rivets and a Wonawanga D-ring. So this was a fairly easy conversion to make. These rivets were cut down, mounted on the cobalt, which was drilled that bit to accommodate the D-ring, and then glued the whole assembly on with E6000. A very, very easy conversion, just the grips and whatever tape over here. This was a little trickier. I had to send this to my friend Martin to drill the holes of the DV6 in the right kind of position and size, and you know, have them accept these kind of threaded hex screws. So yeah, he did all that for me, so thanks again, Martin. And the rest of it was just assembly of the core from Wonawanga and putting everything back together. And as I said before, the bunny ears. And that's really it. So it's a fairly straightforward conversion. Nice little stunt Graflex, a little bit more obscure, a bit more out there. But I do have a near complete collection of all the Graflex based hilts used throughout, well, really the whole saga. So this was one that was missing, and I always wanted to do it, so I have now completed it and added it to the collection, just to kind of complete that evolution, the lineup from the Wampa to the DV6. So it was kind of the missing link there. I might do the Bespin one at some stage. That's going to be exactly like this, just with gaffer tape and the foam grips. That's a maybe. We'll see. Sort of if I find a cheap vintage Graflex one day, I might do that. If I'm lucky enough to find one. But otherwise, I may just do it as a replica. I'm not opposed to that either. But we'll see. I'm less kind of keen on that one than this one. So yeah, that's it really. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the video. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next one.